Hot on the heels of Netflix blackwashing history and portraying Cleopatra as black, Disney threw its hat into the ring of the Diversity Olympics by swapping out the beloved fair-skinned Disney mermaid princess Ariel with someone with a skin tone more palatable to corporate ESG investing. Ever since the first trailer released for this reimagining of the children's story Little Mermaid, many were up in arms over Ariel's new look. And rightfully so. Race-swapping existing characters from timeless stories to meet the demands of modern-day extremist specifications is not only the lowest form of hollow corporate pandering, but it also attempts to overwrite the original piece of art as it was imagined and produced. With these urges left unchecked, in time, Mona Lisa will be called a smug white bitch who holds people down by her very existence, and there will be calls for the painting to undergo a spray tan. But honestly, making Ariel's skin a bit more sunburn resistant is really the only major misstep this movie makes. Now, this isn't a good film, don't get me wrong. It's still a crappy live-action Disney princess film with a super questionable message to pass on to young girls. However, other than turning the Danish mermaid at the center of this Danish fairy tale black, and further diversifying Ariel's father and half of her sisters, the film pretty much leaves the issue skin deep. There's no race-based political messaging, subtle or otherwise. Ariel isn't treated differently because of the color of her skin. She doesn't struggle to get a loan or catch a cab. The original songs weren't given more drum and bass for a quote, urban vibe. Disney mostly played it safe with this one, taking one chance with the sudden pandering diversity and then pretty much leaving it at that. Simply put, while the race swapping is bullshit and you shouldn't support it with your time and your dollars, this movie is not really the outrage machine people were looking for. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's recap the film before doing the post-mortem. We open up on the mostly white and therefore evil sailors who are trying to harpoon mermaids off the starboard bow of their ship. Down below, reimagined Ariel is enthralled with the world above, and she collects items that sink down to her. Her father, King Triton, gets mad when she doesn't show up for some unexplained ceremony. But Ariel's obsession with the world above leads her to be in the right place at the right time to become head over fins infatuated with Prince Eric, the dashing human prince with a heart of gold. At this opportune moment, a storm hits and the human's ship begins to sink, forcing all of the sailors overboard. Eric stays behind to save a dog and ends up starting to drown, but Ariel saves him. Her lovely voice brings him back to consciousness before she's forced to flee when his men come running. King Triton hears of Ariel's cavorting with humans and orders Sebastian, the ultra-Caribbean crab, to keep her away from those filthy air breathers. Back in his extremely diverse idyllic tropical kingdom, Eric has been searching for the girl who saved him, but his black single mother forbids him from looking for her. Right around this time, King Daddy finds out that Ariel is in love with a human and forbids her from ever returning to the surface before he destroys all of her collectibles. At her lowest point, Auntie Ursula the Sea Witch approaches Ariel with an offer. If Ariel gives up her voice, Ursula will turn her into a human for 3 days. If she receives true love's consensual kiss before the clock runs out, she'll stay a human. But if she doesn't, her soul will belong to Ursula. Ariel takes the deal and is transformed into a human. Now out of breath underwater, she bolts to the surface, totally immune to the effects of decompression sickness, and is scooped up by a kindly old black sailor. She's taken to the castle where Eric rushes to her upon news of her arrival, hoping it's the girl who saved him. But he takes one glance at her and determines that there's no way this girl is Ariel. He's seen the original movie after all. They spend some time together anyway and nearly kiss, which would cement Ariel's human form. But Ursula's minions ensure that it doesn't happen. Ursula then decides to take matters into her own tentacles and takes on a young female human form of her own. Eric is immediately seduced by this evil white temptress, and they set a date for their wedding, which is less than 10 hours after they first met. And the kingdom, his advisors, his own damn mother, they're all perfectly fine with this. At the ceremony, Ariel risks life and weave to get her voice back and expose Ursula for the sea cow she is. But just after getting her voice back, the clock runs out on Ariel and she turns back into a mermaid. Celebrating her victory, Ursula returns to the sea with Ariel in tow, ready to capture her soul. King Triton steps in, however, and trades his soul for Ariel's. Ursula takes Triton's crown and trident and is now set to rule the underwater kingdom, when suddenly Eric swims down and attacks her. Ursula balloons up to real-life Melissa McCarthy size and begins to churn up the ocean. Eric is about to be killed when Ariel steers a shipwreck into Ursula, piercing her with the bow and killing her. King Triton comes back to life 30 seconds later and everything is cool. He eventually comes around to accepting Ariel's feelings and turns her into a human so she can be with Eric. Probably a wise move since Eric is constantly in need of saving. Ariel shows up looking like a straight trash bag, and she and Eric kiss and get married. Her father says his goodbyes, sends her off, and the movie comes to an end. So, if you're familiar with the original movie, then you can tell that they really didn't deviate very much from that story. But yet, they somehow managed to make it 40 minutes longer this time around. There were some changes other than those made to most characters' skin color, like the sailors being more openly hostile to mermaids this time around, Scuttle the seagull being gender swapped, Eric having a single black mother now. And of course, in this reimagining, Ariel saves Eric from Ursula, not the other way around as it was in the original. Because in 2023, we can't have a man saving a woman from harm, no matter how much more sense it makes given Eric's nautical prowess. Other than that, this one is pretty faithful to the 1989 original animated version, trying to recreate some scenes to a T. But simply not pushing some racial messaging and sticking to the script of the original wasn't enough to make this a good movie. As stated earlier, this is a crappy live-action Disney princess film, and a half-assed effort of one at that. This is still a hate watch in our book. It's largely boring, even according to the kids the movie is aimed at, and most of the CGI and effects look cheap and shitty. None of the characters have any depth, and that comes with the territory, but they also managed to make none of them likable. Javier Bardem and Daveed Diggs come the closest to being tolerable, playing King Triton and Sebastian respectively. Halle Bailey did okay as Ariel, but there wasn't anything incredible about her performance, and she didn't really add anything to the original other than duplicating it in live action. I, like everyone else in the world, am no fan of Melissa McCarthy, but I will say that playing an obese, bitter old sea hag is right in her wheelhouse. So as we mentioned before, Scuttle the seagull was gender swapped. This wasn't a major character, so it really wouldn't have been a big deal, except this gave them an opening for Awkwafina to jump on board. Even with a small role, Awkwafina manages to be the worst part of this movie. They even threw a new song into this remake, a rap song performed by Awkwafina.
From the women who washed all the clothes, to the hunter who arrows the bows, the chatter all over the palace is that your Prince Eric is gonna propose. What?
As you can imagine, it was the kind of song that led to a lot of busy signals on suicide hotlines and a jump in sales for 10-hour recordings of nails on chalkboards so people could cleanse their hearing. Throughout the film, you're just begging someone to feed this bird some Alka-Seltzer, and her song is definitely the low point of the movie. And the message this movie puts out there is pretty damn shady, telling young girls that it's totally fine to forsake who you are and where you're from if you're infatuated with a guy, as long as he's rich and royalty. But this bullshit message was the same in the original animated movie, so you know Disney has been spewing morally questionable drivel for ages. Coming back to the main point, however, this movie just isn't rife with material to get pissed off about like many expected. Beyond the other problems we already discussed and the hefty helping of diversity poured into Ariel and the rest of the cast, Disney pretty much left it at that and just tried to recreate the original in live action. When watching this one, you get the feeling that Disney knows they've already pushed the envelope and pissed people off with the race swap pandering, and they're afraid to go any further. So while it's bullshit to race swap an existing character just to meet the increasingly extreme demands of a modern society set to consume itself with its own stupidity, we all knew that it was coming already and had our moment of outrage and annoyance when the first trailer came out. There's really nothing else major in the movie itself to berate, at least not on par with erasing the folklore of one group of people in favor of placating another. This movie is just hate bait. They wanted to use the outrage of Ariel's new skin color to generate buzz about the movie, but they weren't willing to take a chance and actually change much of the story. Despite the overwhelming negatives with this film, there were two surprising positives that came out of it. First off, I didn't think Disney would have the balls to silence a black Ariel for half the movie as she was silenced in the original, but they actually stuck to the script here, so kudos for that, and for not treating a diverse character with kid gloves for once. Secondly, this iteration pretty much blew off the feminist messaging about how you lose your voice as a woman when you get married. So we were glad to see that got dropped, but again, you just kind of get the feeling that Disney knew they were already pushing it and didn't want to pile any more contentious issues into the film. As for the reception, well, the movie actually did alright at the box office, pulling in $117 million domestically on opening weekend, but leaving it 5th on the list of the biggest Disney live-action remake debuts behind the likes of The Lion King and Beauty and the Beast. So at least financially, Disney isn't likely to learn any lessons and make any changes based on this movie's showing. As for how people are rating the movie, verified ratings on Rotten Tomatoes are at 95%, which is doubtful to say the least. It's been at 95 since ratings first came in, and it hasn't budged since. Not to mention it doesn't match the general discourse about the movie, nor the ratings on any other site. So I'm calling shenanigans on this number. The live-action Little Mermaid is a shining example of how cultural appropriation is a-okay as long as it's the right cultures being appropriated. And this trend will continue, perpetuated by people who believe that their culture is their culture, and you can't share in it. But your culture belongs to everyone, and we have the right to fuck with it. Original stories and characters from cultures deemed to be diverse are sacrosanct, but anything from a white culture is open to revision. Which unfortunately means we won't be getting that Roots remake starring Jonah Hill because erasing and blackwashing art is only tolerated by one group of people. And speaking of erasing things, The Little Mermaid continues Hollywood's strangely persistent trend of erasing redheaded characters, with most of them being supplanted by black versions. Some kind of representational genocide is going on against gingers. And speaking of representation, just imagine if Disney put this time and effort into creating original black characters in original stories. But Disney has been creatively bankrupt for some time now, so I think we all know it'll be a cold day in hell before they put time and money into giving original black stories their due. For now, they see blackwashing existing characters and stories as representation enough. But that's really all there is to be mad about here. This iteration of The Little Mermaid is still a hate watch and not worth your time and money, but it's no Queen Cleopatra, and it's not the outrage machine people were looking for. Did you have an interest in seeing the live-action Little Mermaid after the negative buzz that followed the first trailer release? Are you surprised that we didn't make any jokes about black people swimming in this video? What other questionable messages have you picked up on in Disney princess films? Let us know in the comments below. Remember to leave a like on the video and consider subscribing to the channel for reviews of current shows and movies. Thank you for swimming along with us today, and we'll catch you on the next one.